Hi, everyone. I hope you're all keeping well today. Welcome to this webinar, The Condition for Success. So my name is Loïc Lemaroy, and I'm the marketing manager here at Headsprint. This webinar is intended to be interactive. The goal is that we want to hear from you. So please do send in your questions, your comments by using actually on the application on the right-hand side, there's a question box. So please do submit your questions and your comments. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session, so we'll be sure to answer those questions then. So today we're joined by Mark Fritz, who is a leadership specialist. He is the author of Truth About Getting Things Done, and as well Lead and Influence, Get More Ownership, Commitment, and Achievement from Your Team. He has taught in business schools around Europe and is a mentor to executives around the world. Mark, welcome. Glad you could join us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'll let you, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's great to be with you and share a few ideas about the conditions for success. In other words, the conditions that enable your people to deliver the success. And so what I want to do is start with a story where it sort of led me to what were my conditions of success when I was leading. And I was leading international organizations, and I also led enterprise system implementations in 3 different parts of the world. And a number of years ago, I heard a podcast, and they were interviewing a very successful entrepreneur. And this entrepreneur was saying something kind of provocative. He says, true entrepreneurs do not set out to create success. He said, true entrepreneurs set out to create the conditions that enable their people to create the success. Because think about it. If you're an entrepreneur and you need to be here all the time to keep company number 1 a success, when do you have time to start company number 2? So I thought that was very insightful. You know, our job as leaders is to create the conditions that enable our people to deliver the success. Because if we need to be there in order to keep things moving, then we are setting the pace of our organization. And we have to be around at the right time to help people and move things forward. I thought that was very good. So I started to think for myself, what were my 3 conditions, or what were my conditions for success? And I came up with 3 key ones. And I want to do is today is share with you those conditions and have you think about your own leadership and that what are the conditions that enable your people to deliver without you being there all the time. You know, it's kind of funny, but later in my career, I thought, you know, my success was enabling that the right conversations are happening about the right topics and the right people, and I'm not in the conversations. That was success, okay? So that they're really taking ownership for that. And the more your people take ownership for the results, the more they can do this on their own. So let me share with you what I found to be the top 3 conditions of success. And it's first is enough clarity so that they can take action on their own, that they have good business judgment and you trust their judgment so they can make decisions on their own. And the third one is influencing skills so that they can collaborate on their own and they can influence others. Okay, so you may share with you in the 3 top boxes there. I studied leadership from all different aspects. I studied the gurus, all different aspects, and there's 3 things that keep coming back in a consistent way that all the leaders need to be able to handle in order to keep climbing. The first one is ambiguity. Okay, we need to deal with ambiguity, and the higher we climb as a leader, the more things aren't clear. But it's our job as a leader to create enough clarity so our people can take action. So we need to be able to deal with ambiguity and to figure out the best path for it and provide our people some direction. Okay, and the second one is dilemmas. You know, if you think about it, really, you pay your people to solve problems because as you climb and climb and climb, you're solving less problems, you're managing more dilemmas. You think about COVID-19, it's not a problem to solve. It's a dilemma that we have to continually manage managing, the spread of the virus so it doesn't spread, managing our economies, etc. So it's not something you can solve today and done. It's a dilemma that you have to consistently manage. Alignment is a good dilemma in business that way. The biggest alignment between manufacturing and sales. It's probably perfectly aligned for a split second. The rest of the time you're managing that. And then the last one in terms of climb is conflict. We need to be able to manage conflict because as you climb, the conflict gets more difficult to manage. They say that we rise to the level of conflict we can manage. And an interesting guru said this about conflict: is conflict is something that you can't take the elevator. You can't be great at conflict at one level and jump to dealing with conflict at another level up here. You have to take the stairs. You have to learn to handle conflict in steps that way. And I reflected over my own leadership. And you know what I found also is that I should share some of the conflicts, some of the political issues with some of my key people so that they can grow and learn how to handle it in steps. So as leaders, we can't shield our people from some of the conflicts sometimes because when do they learn how to deal with it? I had one leader one time mention to me, guys, when I got my first supervisor's job, I said, wow, what is all this mess I have to deal with and all things, because they didn't realize at the level of those things. So keep in mind these three conditions for success, and they're really linked to the three things you need to deal with effectively to climb higher. You need to be able to handle ambiguity because you need to provide good clarity. You need to be able to make good decisions around the dilemmas so that you provide direction for your people, and you need to be able to handle the conflict so that you can get and keep the alignment and teamwork down through the organization. So these are the three. What I'd like to do is delve into each three a little bit in more detail for you. Now, the first one is enough clarity. Now, if you think about this, if something isn't clear in your organization, something bad is usually happening, okay? So, we need to provide enough clarity, and you need enough provide clarity to take action. You need to provide enough clarity that they know the direction you want to go so they can make decisions on their own. And certainly the pace has to be clear. In other words, the steps, the milestones, and so forth. There's two things I found with very good organizations is the direction is very, very clear in terms of also the direction and focus and the priorities. Okay. It's very interesting. And in working with leaders, I found everybody can choose between good and bad, but not everybody can choose between great and good. Because sometimes it's very difficult for us to stop doing something that's good. But if we don't stop some of the good, we don't put enough resources on the great. And so what I found is that the organizations and the leaders who are very, very strong on the direction, it provides a clearer focus for people to put more time on that great. And think about for your own leadership. If you're not letting go of some good things to do, you're probably slowing your team down because it's the great things that create the future faster. And so there's another thing I found with clarity too, is that's on the timelines. I've never seen a successful organization that didn't have a sense of urgency, but it doesn't come just by chance. They make very clear the steps and the timelines there, and they're really focused on measuring things around that. I remember when I was leading and I had some major projects, I put some money behind the projects in terms of a bonus. And I paid people not just if they delivered the project on time, but I asked them for 6 milestones that they need to hit to deliver this project on time. If they missed some of the milestones, it lowered the bonus amount that way. So, what I was always thinking about is achievement and pace. And you need enough clarity so that people, what's most important to do, the great, and you need enough clarity on the timeline so it creates a sense of urgency to make things happen and move forward. Okay, so keep in mind that. And for me, sometimes people ask me, how do you know if you have enough clarity? Of course, are they taking action in the direction you want to go and at the pace you want to go, but also you've got to listen. By your questions and asking your people the right questions, you can see if things are clear enough that way. Let me give you a tip. One of the most powerful leadership sort of focuses you can have is something called NIFO. Nose in, fingers out. Your nose is in. You're asking the right questions. You're not surprised by something you should have known, but your fingers aren't in all the time, meaning you're not telling your people what to do. Because see, if you're telling your people what to do, yet you're saving them from thinking. And if you're saving them from thinking, you're saving them from growing. Okay. So keep in mind that. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that think about this too. You're the chief role model, right? They kind of see what you do and they copy. I'll tell you a funny one. I lived in various countries around the world, and one of the countries was Japan. And I was only there for a couple weeks. I didn't know much of the language at all. And a lady would come through pushing a cart, selling tea, coffee, candy, and everything. So one day she brought her young daughter, and she didn't know how to say daughter in English. I didn't know how to say daughter in Japanese. And she said, "This is my copy." This is my copy. So think about it, your children copy you, your people copy you in this way. So the more you're leading them, the more you're enabling them with the clarity to take their own decisions. The more your nose in, fingers out, the more you're creating more leaders below you too. Okay, so that's the first one. First one is clarity. Second one is business judgment. You need people that you can trust their judgment to make the decisions. Because think about it. If you can't delegate the decision to them, you can't make a decision without knowing anything. You have to drop down and sort of do their thought process and their job in order to make the decisions for them. So let me share with you an interesting one. Let's do a scenario. One of your best people in your leadership team, you trust them like 90% to make good decisions. You really trust their judgment. They leave the company and the organization on Friday. On Monday morning, the person that starts and replaces this person, the only person you can put there quickly, you only trust 30%. How does Monday morning look? Probably not so good, huh? So think about it this way. When you lose decision makers, you lose personal life. Okay, you can have great people. They're very good. They're a good team player. They're very knowledgeable about the business. But if you can't trust their judgment, you have to get involved a lot more. And you have to be involved at the right time so that you keep the pace going. So you got to be trusting judgment so that you can let go. And you got to test their judgment, especially when you're hiring people. You need to test in the hiring with scenarios. And so you need to check them and see what their thought process is behind something. And the very best thing to do is once they give you what their ideas are, ask them one other thing. Ask them what assumptions are they making? Because I found that, it reveals the depth of their thought process when they give you sort of the quality of those assumptions. Okay. And here's the thing I found too. Some of the biggest problems in business come because people are making decisions and doing things with different assumptions. And because you haven't discussed through those, they don't realize that they're working with different assumptions, and they're all looking at each other's decisions as being wrong, but we just haven't gotten to shared assumptions. So whenever you're dealing with something really difficult, um, consider having a discussion just very quickly. What are the assumptions we're making to make sure your people are aligned that way? And then the last thing here is, you really have to delegate and coach, judgment. Often we don't explain enough some of the decisions we're making, or we don't involve people enough in the thought process so they can sort of learn a thought process about how to do these things. So, keep in mind that in terms of, always looking to grow your people's judgment. And as we come back, what I said about conflict, introduce your people to various of the conflicts or the politics in steps so that they learn how to deal with that, and they're not as surprised. So I found that business judgment is huge. We really need to continually grow business judgment. And you need to look for ways to do that. And one of the best ways is, give your people projects that you can manage the situation in a way to control that bad things won't happen if they make a few poor decisions. And the beauty of that is you can have small projects for the younger people, medium-sized projects for mid people, and very big projects for others. And I found that projects is a great way to test your people's judgment and to help them grow that in a confined type of structure and guidance. And so that's huge. And there's another benefit of giving people projects to help grow their judgment. Think about this, is that if you have small things, medium-sized, big things changing all the time in your organization begins to feel that change is normal. And I find that the best cultures in businesses, they feel that change is normal. And so there's something changing all the time. It's not like we do a big project and then, we do 6 months of big project, then we relax for 3 months and so forth. But we always have something going along the way. Okay. So the second one here is business judgment. And I want you to think about this, is that really, when you lose decision makers, you lose personal life, because you're going to have to get involved a lot more than you'd really want to. So I found that you hire for judgment, you keep growing judgment. If you have someone that you inherited in a team that you'll just never trust their judgment, and you never will, you've got to do something about it, because it's going to eat at you and drive stress in you, because you're basically doing someone's job that you shouldn't be doing. And by default, if you do more of your people's job, it means doing less of your job. And so you're not being the leader for everybody else. Okay. So second one is business judgment. Now, the third one is influencing skills. And I found this: if your people can't collaborate within themselves, amongst themselves, all the conflict keeps coming to you, and you need to handle it. So you need people that have adaptability, people with self-awareness, people who can find ways to work with each other so they can, collaborate without you being there. In fact, I think one of the key abilities in this type of way of business now, the globalization and the interconnectivity, the communications, is the ability to adapt to each other. Now, foundation is self-awareness and understanding yourself, but also understanding that you're dealing with different personalities, you're dealing with different cultures, and trying to get your message across and how to do that. The top CEO coach in the world, I think Marshall Goldsmith, says, every successful CEO has probably the same two weaknesses. And, the first one is not listening. And the second one is maybe giving the answer too often and everything. And it's part of our influencing skills. And so, those fundamentals, the more we grow our influencing skills, the more we magnify our impact with others. And think about it this way too, as a foundation. Let me ask you this question. If someone doesn't listen to you, how do you feel? Not very good, right? You feel discouraged and so forth, but listening values people. So I found that the best influencers are really good listeners, because you're actually influencing people better when you're listening than when you're talking that way. And if you're giving them the easy answer, they're not thinking. And if they're not thinking, you're not influencing their thought process much. You might be able to convince them or manipulate them on something, but it just doesn't work. And one thing I found too, and I got a tremendous insight one time when I was traveling in my job and throughout Europe and so forth, and different subsidiaries. I often ask the general manager of the subsidiary, tell me your superstars. And I want to buy them lunch or a dinner or a beer or something. And I took one of the top salespersons out in one of the countries, and he said something very insightful to me that just stuck with me forever. He said, I owe all my success as a salesperson to one phrase: if the prospect or customer is talking, I'm winning. In other words, if he's listening and asking the right questions, they're selling themselves. So you really want to build an organization where and grow your people so that they're listening to each other. I think one of the biggest difficulties for all of us is that the time when we really need to listen is when someone disagrees with us, because that's when we're really learning how to influence them back. And sometimes with someone disagreeing with us strongly, if we listen, we can turn them around in 180 the other way in a tremendous way. And I always found this one insightful too. A consultant said something that stuck with me too. He said, my goal in life, he said, is to constantly meet people who disturb my view of the world. Because if I meet people who think different than me, it's going to challenge me to think differently as well. So we need to grow our people's influencing skills, and us as leaders, we need to grow ours as well and become a good role model. And think about it. If your people can't influence the customer or the vendor, or the people can't influence the next department, then you have to be around there to help that influence, to quote, band-aid their lack of influence, which means you're always going to need to be there. So influencing skills is for collaboration within your organization, across organizations, but also influencing people inside, outside the company, so that you can sort of drive more towards what you want in those factors. So I found 3 conditions for success. You need to have enough clarity that people can take action on their own. You need to have enough, if I just quickly, clarity to take action on their own. You need people with business judgment who can make decisions on their own. And you need people with influencing skills so they can, collaborate with each other and they can influence others outside the organization on their own. Now, it's interesting. If I ask you this question, now, they're all very important: clarity, business judgment, influencing skills. But if I ask you this question, which is more important of those 3 for you to invest more time and more focus in? Would it be clarity? Would it be business judgment? Or would it be influencing skills? Think about it. When I ask people this, they're all over the place. Oh, first, clarity. If no clarity is not there, you're in trouble. Then I say, oh, business judgment. They need to make decisions. And oh, no, everybody needs influencing skills. Here's what I found. The number one that I focus more time on than others was this one, business judgment. Okay. So if I ask you this question, which one of these 3 is most difficult to fix? And that's probably business judgment, because you doesn't fix that in a week or 2. Your best people can help you with clarity, and your best people can help you band-aid the influencing skills. But either you trust people or you don't. And in fact, let's say you have someone who has good fundamentals, good thought process, but just lacks some of the experience so that you can really truly let go. The fastest I have ever done it is 18 months by giving them experiences and different things to the point where I felt I could really let go. So keep in mind that, and do a little analysis of your own leadership team. What percentage are you trusting each person? Do you see the capability in that person to increase that ability and judgment? Because if you feel that you'll never trust them, or they just lack the basic common sense, you need to do something about that, because you'll be doing their job and so forth. And so let's say you drop down and do the job of some people you don't trust, and you spend less time with the people you do trust. You're basically working more with the people that are slowing your organization, but you're not working with the people who are making your organization run fast, because you really need to spend more time with your key people. And that's probably the biggest thing I found with leaders, is that they often let other people, steal their time. In other words, get your best people to help the average people, and you keep focus on the best people to keep growing them as much as you can, because they're setting the pace for that. Okay, so keep in mind the 3 we talked about: enough clarity, you need business judgment, and you need influencing skills. You need them with influencing skills. Now, remember I said business judgment was number 1? there's one thing I found in terms of looking at people that is really key for having the right people around you with this business judgment. And here's an interesting chart here to share with you. If you notice on the chart, you have uncertainty on one side, you have complexity on the bottom. And if you think about today's world, it's very, very uncertain and it's very, very complex. It's way up in the top right, probably higher than your PC can go. Okay, if you think about where we were years ago, before globalization and all these, the world was simpler. Down in the lower left, you could find an answer to things. But in today's world, there's no perfect answers anymore. There's only options, right? And you need people who can think in options. You need people with the business judgment to make those quick decisions on their own. So I usually classify the people into two types of people. You have the A mindset people who are always trying to find a perfect answer. They're often the perfectionists. They're often micromanagers too. Or you have the O people. The O people are say, hey, there is no perfect answer. It's up to me to think about the options and move things forward. Okay. So, if you think about it, I always ask people when I do sessions, I say, which would you like in your leadership positions in your organizations? Would you like O's or A's? And almost everybody says O's. Okay, but say in your organization, would you like a combination of O's and A's, or would you like only O's, etc.? And they say, of course, a combination. But if you have somebody early in your career, take your example, engineers, or I worked a lot with lawyers too. And I ask them when I'm in a session, I say, well, where did you start your career? Did you start as an O or an A? And all of them would say I started as an A and then I worked my way that way. I worked a lot with general counsels and general counsels of businesses, and they say, hey, the success in a general counsel role is that being a very good O mindset. In fact, having the business people come to you for your business judgment, not just your law, the knowledge of the law. So I would think about this is that think about who you have in the people around you, O's and A's. Because if you have too many A's, they're very high maintenance. And they're not going to be able to think of the options and decide on their own. You're going to have to be around there to help them. Okay. So I found that this is it's an interesting chart to think about your own organization and think about also who's on the potential to grow up because and do bigger jobs, because sometimes the A's are doing a fantastic job of where they are, but they're going to be a disaster when they become a leader. And let me share with you one thing too that I think you might find interesting, is that I think, when your people come to you and they have an issue and they want an answer, don't ask them don't give them the answer. Ask them, what options do you think we have, and why would one option be better than another? The biggest problem I see sometimes as leaders is they'll ask the person, what's the best thing to do? And if you only ask people one thing and you don't like their answer, you have to go against them. And now they're not going to take as much ownership for your answer as they will for theirs. So I found that the better question to ask is, what options do you think we have? And then now you can coach them towards what could be a better option. Okay, so I found that, here's an interesting thing. Later in my career, I found this, is that if my people couldn't think of more than one option, it kind of put a question in my head, do they know their job well enough? Because in today's world, there's always multiple options, okay? So, if they can't think of the different options, maybe they don't know the job well enough, or they're not looking at the issue in the best way. And also, an option today might not be an option 2 weeks from now, etc. Okay, so in summary on this one, grow people, promote people who have options type of thinking, who have the ability to think of the options on their own, who have the business judgment to make those decisions too. With your A's, if you think they're capable, find ways to grow them, to broaden that thinking and force them into more of an options type of mindset. Because the more you can do that, the more valuable they're going to be for you, because they're doing more thinking on their own. And think about it for the A's. Even if the A's get the perfect answer, they're often wanting to come to you to confirm if they got it. So they're still coming to you anyway that way. So in a complex, uncertain world, there's no more perfect answers. It's options. And invest in your O people, grow your O people, and make sure all your leaders are O's, or else you're going to drop down and do more of people's jobs. Okay. So keep in mind your questions, and then as we get towards the end, I'll make sure we reserve time for the questions. Two more things I wanted to cover for you. And first is this kind of idea around the right pipeline to grow. Okay, let me share with you a quick story. I read the book, the Tony Hsieh, Delivering Happiness, and I watched Tony Hsieh a couple times. The CEO of Zappos, and he said a provocative thing. He said employees are not your most important asset. He said the employee pipeline is the most important asset, so that if you lose someone, you gain someone back. I don't think the employee pipeline is the most important asset. I think it's the business judgment pipeline that's one of your most important assets in business. So you have three pipelines. You have a micromanagement pipeline. So if they're micromanaging, if you're telling your people what to do, you're creating future micromanagers. And think about it, if you have a micromanager pipeline, you not only have a present problem, you have a future problem, because they're creating all these micromanagers for the future, right? And look at it this way, micromanagement comes with a speed limit. Whenever you micromanage people, you're operating to your head speed to keep everything straight, to tell them what to do. You're not using the speed of the full team. Now, you're a leader, you're going to grow more leaders, okay? But if you're not growing the business judgment along the same way, you're not creating the same value. You need to grow people's judgment. So you build their judgment, you trust it, so you have decision makers at every level. There was a very insightful leader said one time, very interesting. He said this. He said, successful leaders, principles flow down, decisions flow up. In other words, principles and building that trust and so forth flows down, decisions flow up, because speed comes when you make the decisions at the level where people have the most information to make the best decision and the quickest decision that way. So you're making decisions more at other levels. So you need to build the pipeline that creates the most value. Now, I do a lot of CEO managing director groups, and I think I've done about 200 in the past sort of 10 years across Europe and different places. And it's interesting. Some leaders want to sell their company, and they want to sell their company. They started the company, grew it up, and they want to sell it and do some other things, either a portfolio career or take it easy. But so much of the decision making is within them. And I've seen this so many patterns where so much decision making was in the managing director. They got less money for the company because the decision making wasn't built into the organization, and their money was sort of prorated based on how well the earnings were for the next few years, because the company purchasing the company there wanted to make sure they could hit the earnings as they put the business judgment back into the organization. So the value within your organization is not just your people. The value is the people who can make decisions, because decisions is valuable in keeping speed that way. So think about your own pipeline that way. And if you look at your succession plans and things like that, look at the level and the quality of the decision making that way, not just delivering, but deciding, and the depth of decision making within each organization, because that's where the real value of your organization is. Okay. Now, last thing I wanted to cover is this. Let me ask you this question. Think about this. Once you know what you want to achieve, you know why you want to achieve it, and you know by when you want to achieve it, what's your next thought? You know what, why, and when. What's your next thought? When I ask groups when I do this, over half the group would say how. But here's what I found. The most successful leaders say who, okay? Not how. Okay, it's how you're going to micromanage more. Think about this. If you go to how by yourself, you're thinking of the how, your how is limited because it's only your own knowledge and experiences that go into the solution. If you ever notice when you go into a CEO's office or a very high up leader, some issues come, say, call such and such in, call such and such in, get such and such on the phone, because they want as much brain power on the issue right away. Okay. The second reason is if you take the how halfway and then you delegate it to your people, it never feels like theirs. It's still yours. So they're not going to take as much ownership. So when you travel too far with the how by yourself before delegating it, your people aren't taking as much ownership. And then the third reason, which is really, really important, the faster you get a who involved, the faster you can get rid of it. Okay, so you're going to be able to get rid of it faster. So let me share with you a story where I built this from. And it actually came from my client. My client sent me an email and he said, I figured out my job as a leader. And in the subject line of the email was, my how is who. He had a huge problem. And his first instinct was to call his best person in and tell this person how to fix the problem. But he heard my voice in his head. So he called his best person in. He said, could you think of some options to fix this problem? Come back tomorrow morning and let's have a discussion. So the person came back with two or three options. They had a discussion as to which one would work best. They decided, and his best person went out and fixed the problem. So he sent me an email with that subject line. He said, my how is who. My how is not how. I pay my people for the how. My job is to grow the who's, and so my how is always who. The faster I get a who involved, the faster I can get rid of it. Okay. So, and think about it this way, think of some of the leaders, I always laugh when I hear this, who is, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was known as the Teflon president, I mean, nothing would stick. He always had a who around who could do it. Now, this is going to sound like Dr. Seuss, but if you don't have a who is the who? It's always you. And so I found this is that the best leaders are always thinking who's. Do they have the right who around them? Are they surrounding themselves with people who have strengths and their weaknesses? Are they making a strong team around it? Because it's your team which drive your success that way. And the more you delegate faster, the faster you get a who involved is the faster things are moving forward. Let me share with you two things, why leaders don't let go. Okay, and it's interesting, I've done a letting go session with CEOs and managing directors, and I've done it maybe 9 or 10 times. And I often ask them to brainstorm on a flip chart all the reasons why they don't let go. And every time, at least 80% of the reasons had nothing to do with their people or the situation. It had all to do with them. And so there's two main reasons I found where people don't let go. First one is control. Okay, you don't trust people, so you want to do it all yourself. You have to learn to get control through people and not through information or knowing everything. Okay, if knowing everything was the key to success, then the librarians would be the most successful people in the world. And the second one is you have to let go of things you like to do. It's comfortable. Things we like to do, we hold on to it. And if we hold on to things we like to do, we're slowing our best people from growing because they would love to do it. And we're not doing things that we could do. So I found that the people who really get the who's involved faster, they gain control through people and not through information. And they're strong enough to let go of some things they like doing in order for their people to grow faster. Okay? So Here's some ideas around the things, the 3 conditions for success: clarity, business judgment, influencing skills. And remember about this concept of my, how, is who. A couple things I'm going to leave you with, and then we'll take questions. Here's a key list of leadership behaviors I found. Working with leaders, I found that the best leaders can lead themselves, the best leaders can influence others, and the best leaders can drive change. So it's a nice little cheat sheet for you. And when you get the materials from this session, there's a nice little illustration that will illustrate some of the key points I shared with you today. Okay, in terms of the 3 conditions for success and my, how, is who, etc. So you can share this with your teams as you go. So hopefully you pick up some ideas here. And is there anything, questions that I can answer that could help you with some of the things I covered today?
Mark, thank you very much for this. It was very, very interesting. I've actually learned a lot. First of all, there's some things that I need to let go. Thank you for that. Actually, I do have a question. So you spoke about like the 3 conditions, and one of them is the influence and skills. And you talked about collaboration. Obviously, you know, we're all today working remotely. How do you actually collaborate better in, I'll say, you know, in a COVID world?
Yeah, I think the collaboration is critical in a virtual environment that we have now. You know, I started leading virtually 24 years ago. And in fact, I worked virtually when I left and created my own company and so forth. So, you know, all my vendors aren't in the UK and other things. And I found that you've got to get people sharing more. And the problem is this. Think about this. If you had to have a call with 10, say 10 people of your team, and you want to get some ideas and get people sharing and collaborating and think of some good ideas and so forth. If I ask you, how much time would it take for you to get 30 ideas out in a Zoom call or some type of conference call? And you'd say, well, it'd probably take a couple hours because people would talk and everything. And I found that, you know, when you work virtually, you spend more time getting the ideas out of people's heads, and you spend less time discussing them. And so when I was leading often, I'd ask people, you know, before a meeting, we have a key meeting on this, share me 3 key ideas how we could deal with this. You know, I have my secretary cut and paste everybody's 3 ideas into a spreadsheet. I do a quick sort. I put people's names next to it. We start the whole meeting looking at everybody's ideas this way. And so I found that the critical success factor of collaboration is getting people sharing their ideas and understanding what's in other people's heads. Because if you do it only based on conversation, you only get the extroverts participating on those calls. You don't get the introverts. But if you get everybody's input ahead of time, it allows the introverts' ideas out there, and sometimes they have very good ideas. So I found that, you know, asking for input is also a way for people to taking more ownership, because if you ask for input and people see that their input is being used, they'll support the whole solution because they want their part of it successful. And so, you know, I think, you know, creating an environment where you can get everybody's input out and and talked about and shown is really critical for collaboration, especially in this environment.
No, I think that's a really, really good point. I mean, during, you know, the lockdown, we did a lot of brainstorm, and I realized that, as you said, only the extroverts were the one participating. So actually, it's a good point to have, you know, I'll say maybe like a prep session where the introverts can actually share their ideas. So no, thank you very much. That's actually quite valuable information. So we have another question that just came in. So great insight, that makes sense. But what evidence is there to show it makes a sustainable difference? How do you create an evidence-based approach to this? Is there an index that already exists?
I haven't built an index on this one. I tell you, the evidence that I've seen resides in the leader, and the people that work according to this and so forth, or change their approach. They say, "I've got my life back," and that they they could be working the same number of hours sometimes even, but they feel better. Because think about this: when you micromanage, your time is not in your control. You need to be around there all the time to keep things moving, to answer your people's questions. So you don't control it. You have to be around when your people need you. But if you create the environment where your people don't need you, you decide how you build it. You decide how you're going to enable the clarity, the business job you do. And so more of your time was within your control because your job is more front loaded. You're enabling people to deliver versus you're there at the end helping them to deliver every minute. And so I found that the biggest how would you say, uh, the biggest test of this working is in the success and the quality of life of the leader. In other words, put it this way, I found what I do as a job is I enable more leadership success and more dinners at home. And so that's the concept around this. And I found it simply as an entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur, you can't afford to be in every single company and keep it a success. You got to hire good people around you who can make decisions. Yeah.
That's actually really good points. Um, let's go to the next one. Excellent webinar, thank you. What is your best advice for an aspiring leader? Where would you start?
Well, first I would start is understand what it takes to keep yourself to lead yourself and keep yourself focused. Because whenever your focus doesn't stay clear, you're now going to impact the whole organization. And so you're not chasing all the shiny objects and things like that. So I'd say is that what can keep you most focused? And I'd say if you say these three conditions, that's your top priority as a leader. What can you do each week to move and create more clarity, to grow more judgment, and to enable more of the influencing skills that way? In other words, wherever you're needed all the time should be something that you should reflect on and say, what can I do better? But the biggest thing I found, because of the complexity we have today, and because of the uncertainty and everything, our focus is under attack all the time. And the single most important thing, as I said earlier in the session, is I found with the strongest leaders is they're good at choosing between great and good. And they're willing to let go of a few good in order to focus on the great and go faster, because there's never enough time to do all the good these days. So I'd say is being able, very good at leading yourself and being very good at your focus and knowing what's most important, because you're setting that focus for your organization as well.
No, I have to agree there. Let's go to the next one. Hi, Mark. When it comes to reviewing people, like having an interview, do we have any rule or short way of assessing people on these qualities, given a short period of time?
Yeah, I think, what I found is there's some companies have this too, is that when you're trying to assess people quickly, um, they have for each key role, they had like 10 to 15 different one paragraph scenarios. And so they just give them a few sentence scenario and say, what would you do in this situation? So think about it. If you're using the same 10 or 15 scenarios across different interviewers all the time, you have a good baseline. So you can see when people are trying to fool you or things. So you're better off that way. So I found the best interview process is to have some assessments up front, for sure, about personality or other assessments. There's some good agility assessments out there too now. Like Korn Ferry has one and so forth, Some assessments enable you to ask the better questions. In other words, assessments are great too, but they enable you to ask good questions, but then also have some scenarios that you often use where you can quickly assess someone because you have a good baseline of using them multiple times.
Great. Another question. What concrete first steps can you recommend to a leader who is currently more of a micromanager to change them to the different styles that you described? How to start?
Yeah, I think the first start, I'd say always, whenever you think who, that way. But also, I think you have to invest time and just, stop always. Instead of giving the answer, always ask the question. And so the thing that's going to stop you is asking better questions so that your people can uncover on their own. And the other thing is that if you, as a micromanager, if you have to give the answer, don't give the answer directly. Give the answer in the form of a story or an example, because psychologically, people do not feel directly told if they get a story or an example. Okay, they get the idea what to use it. And then also the story and example provide a quote context so they know how to do it. So the best thing I can say is think who, not how, if you think about doing it yourself. But also, if people come to you, always lead with the questions. Ask better questions so that people can uncover the answer on their own.
So it's about having more of a consultative approach in your leadership in a way.
Yeah, you really the thing is it's the main default here, right? If it's your answer, it's never theirs. So they don't feel ownership of it. And if it fails, they don't say, well, hell, I'll just go back to my boss and get a better answer. So that's the problem in that, is that you want your people to feel ownership and pride. And they can't feel pride in something that's not theirs.
Sure. So actually, I wanted to ask, I mean, you're a head-spring educator. I'm sure it's something that you've delivered as part of a program. Many of our, I'll say attendees, participants today are potentially, clients or prospects. How would that fit in a program, in a leadership program that you've delivered? How would it look like?
Yeah, I focus my leadership programs on the power of ownership. And so this conditions for success, it sits in having the right mindset. You need an outcomes mindset because you need people to own achievement, not just activity. And so it's really around a mindset. It's really around leading yourself, because you have to be strong in leading yourself. Not do the things you like to do all the time, and not controlled by information and things. And you also need to be able to influence others. And you have to grow your influencing skills, because that's where your power comes from. And the last thing is that you have to create the environment. You have to put the right metrics around there that drive the right behaviors, and the right way of leading and managing the progress, right? So all leaders are a combination manager leader, right? Because you can't define how you want to lead by yourself. Your people determine the leader you need to be to get the best from them. So, you think conditions of success. I mean, if you want to lead purely by delegating everything, you have to have a strong team around you. But if you inherited a bunch of micromanagers below you, you're going to have to invest in different ways, and maybe change them in steps. But for me, everything I do is focused on getting the people to take more ownership of the achievement, feeling more pride in it. And when your people feel more pride, they're doing it more for themselves than they are for you. And that is really powerful.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're actually coming close to the hour. So first of all, Mark, I would like to really thank you for joining us today. I really enjoyed this session. I found it really interesting.
My
There's
pleasure.
actually something that I can implement today in my work, so I'll make sure to use the cheat sheet and apply all that to my work. I'd like as well to really say thank you to everybody who joined the session. I hope as well you found it very valuable. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Headspring. We'll make sure to actually respond to those questions. So again, Mark, thank you very much for joining. I really hope that we'll have another session soon where we'll touch on another, topic that you're interested in.
That'd be great.
And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you
And a
very much, everyone,
big
for joining
thank you to
today.
everybody on the line today. I know August is a month where we're all heading to the beach, so thank you very much for attending.
Exactly. So everybody have a really great day. Stay safe and see you soon for our next session. Bye.
Bye bye.